The metal floor felt cold against Daniel Wright's knees. He had been kneeling in this position for what felt like hours, hands bound behind his back, listening to voices outside his cell discuss his fate like he was already dead. The holding cell on the Galactic Judiciary Station smelled of rust and fear, a combination Daniel had become familiar with over the past 3 days. He had not stolen anything. Daniel knew this with absolute certainty. He was a cargo hauler, someone who moved supplies from station to station, nothing more. But the security footage had been altered. The manifest changed, and now medical supplies worth thousands of credits were missing with his digital signature all over the theft. Someone had framed him perfectly. The cell door hissed open. A guard walked in, not one of the usual enforcers who enjoyed pushing prisoners around. This one looked tired, old, with scales that had lost their shine and eyes that had seen too much. He was a Felian, a species known for their honor, and right now he looked deeply uncomfortable. "You should have taken the plea deal," the guard said quietly, glancing at the camera in the corner before stepping in front of it, blocking the view with his body. "At least then you would have just gone to a work colony." Daniel looked up at him. "I did not steal anything. I told them that. I told everyone that." The guard's expression shifted to something that might have been pity. "Kid, it does not matter anymore. The trial was scheduled for today, but it got canceled. You have been sold," the word hung in the air like poison. "Sold? To the entertainment syndicates. They run death matches on Blackwater Moon. Rich criminals bet on the outcomes. You understand what I am saying?" Daniel's blood ran cold. He had heard rumors about such places, whispered stories from other haulers who traveled the darker trade routes, places where the law did not reach, where people disappeared into arenas and never came out. "I thought I was fighting other prisoners," Daniel said, his voice barely steady. The guard shook his head slowly. "No, they put you in with something else. Something worse." He pulled out a small data pad and turned it toward Daniel. "I should not show you this, but you deserve to know what you are facing." The screen showed security footage from what looked like another arena. The camera focused on a creature that made Daniel's breath catch in his throat. It stood 8 feet tall, covered in black scales that seemed to absorb the light around them. 6 eyes glowed red in the darkness, arranged in pairs down an elongated skull. Its arms ended in claws as long as knives, and a thick tail covered in bone spikes dragged behind it as it moved. The creature moved across the arena floor toward a huddled figure in the corner. "The attack was fast, brutal, and over in seconds. That is a Ravager," the guard said. "From Crimson Vale, a death world that makes Earth look like a vacation spot. They call this one 16 because of how many people it has killed. You will be 17. Daniel could not speak. He could not think. His mind simply refused to process what he was seeing. "The rules are simple," the guard continued. "You get locked in the arena with it. You have 24 hours. If you survive until dawn, they let you go. But no one has ever survived. Most last less than an hour." He paused. "I am sorry. I have children of my own. If I could do something, I would." The guard left, and Daniel was alone with his thoughts. They came for him an hour later. Different guards, ones who did not care to speak or explain. They injected something into his neck, and the world went fuzzy around the edges. He felt himself being moved, carried, loaded into something. The drug pulled him under. When Daniel woke, he was lying on cold metal in near darkness. His head pounded and his mouth was dry. He pushed himself up slowly, blinking until his eyes adjusted to the dim light. He was in a circular room, maybe 80 feet across. The walls rose straight up to a ceiling 50 feet above. Cameras dotted the walls, their red lights blinking like watching eyes. Overhead lights provided just enough illumination to see by, casting long shadows across the floor. Daniel stood on shaking legs. He wore only basic clothes, thin pants, and a shirt that would provide no protection. Around his neck he felt cold metal. His fingers explored it carefully. A collar, heavy and solid, with a small box on one side that probably contained the shock mechanism the guard had mentioned. A speaker crackled to life somewhere above. "Welcome to the pit. You have 24 hours. Survive until dawn and you earn your freedom. The odds are currently 500 to 1 against you. Place your bets now." Laughter echoed through the speaker, multiple voices enjoying the joke. To them, this was entertainment. To Daniel, it was a death sentence. A grinding noise made him spin around. On the far side of the arena, a section of wall was sliding upward, revealing darkness beyond. Daniel's heart hammered in his chest. He looked around frantically for anything he could use as a weapon, But the arena was empty except for a few grates in the floor and some dispensers built into the walls. Something moved in the darkness of the doorway. 2 red eyes appeared first, then 4 more above them, glowing like embers. The Ravager stepped into the arena, and Daniel understood why they called it a Death World creature. It moved with a predator's grace, each step perfectly balanced, muscles rippling under those black scales. The bone spikes on its tail scraped across the metal floor with a sound like knives on stone. 16 entered fully and stopped, its 6 eyes fixing on Daniel. The creature's head tilted slightly, studying him. Daniel could see its nostrils flaring, probably taking in his scent. The claws on its hands flexed, and Daniel heard the click of them extending further. Every instinct screamed at Daniel to run, to find a corner and curl up, to do something other than stand in the open. But he had watched enough nature documentaries back on Earth to know that running triggered a predator's chase instinct, and he had nowhere to run to anyway. So Daniel did something that felt completely insane. He walked to the center of the arena and sat down cross-legged on the floor. His legs shook so badly he was not sure they would support him much longer anyway. He placed his hands on his knees and looked at the Ravager. "My name is Daniel," he said, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat and tried again. "My name is Daniel Wright. I am from Earth. I did not want to be here, and I think maybe you did not want to be here either." The Ravager stopped circling. Its massive head tilted the other way, and Daniel could have sworn he saw confusion in those alien eyes. "I am not going to run," Daniel continued, forcing himself to keep talking even though his voice shook. "And I am not going to fight you. I know I would lose. You are bigger, stronger, and you have claws that could tear me apart. But I am also not going to make this easy for them." He gestured upward at the cameras. "They want a show. They want me to scream and beg and run until you catch me. I will not give them that." 16 took a step closer. Then another. Daniel forced himself to sit still, even as every nerve in his body screamed danger. The creature was now close enough that Daniel could feel heat radiating from its body. He could smell something sharp and alien like ozone and copper. The Ravager lowered its head until it was level with Daniel's face, close enough that he could see his reflection in those red eyes. Its mouth opened slightly, revealing rows of teeth designed to tear meat from bone. Hot breath washed over Daniel's face. "If you are going to kill me," Daniel whispered, "then do it. But know that I see you. Not a monster. Not a machine. You are alive and you are trapped here just like me. We are both prisoners." For a long moment, nothing happened. Daniel could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Then slowly the Ravager pulled back. It sat down 15 feet away, its tail curling around its body, and simply watched him. In the observation room far above, someone swore in frustration. This was not the show they had paid for. But in the arena, Daniel let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. He had survived the first encounter. 23 hours to go. "Thank you," he said softly to the creature. "Thank you for not killing me yet." 16's eyes never left him, but the creature settled into a more relaxed position, waiting, watching, and Daniel realized that maybe, just maybe, this killer was as curious about him as he was terrified of it. The long night had only just begun. Hours crawled by in the arena like wounded animals. Daniel had not moved from his spot in the center of the floor, and 16 had not moved from its position 15 feet away. They watched each other in the dim light, predator and prey locked in a stalemate that neither seemed willing to break. Daniel's throat was dry. The fear that had flooded his system was slowly being replaced by thirst and hunger. He needed water, but the dispensers were built into the far wall, and reaching them meant moving. Moving meant potentially triggering an attack, but staying still meant dying of dehydration, which seemed like a stupid way to go when there was water 20 feet away. "I need water," Daniel said aloud, more to himself than to the creature. "I am going to stand up now. I am going to walk to that wall. I am not running away. I'm just thirsty." He stood slowly, keeping his movements careful and deliberate. 16's head lifted, tracking his motion, but the Ravager did not stand. Daniel took that as a good sign. He walked toward the wall where he had spotted the water dispenser earlier, keeping his pace steady and his breathing as calm as he could manage. The dispenser was simple, designed to be used by various species. Daniel pressed the activation panel, and water flowed into a small basin. He cupped his hands and drank deeply, the cool liquid washing away the dryness in his throat. He drank until his stomach felt uncomfortable, not knowing when he would get another chance. Then he had an idea. It was risky, possibly stupid, but everything about his situation was already impossible. He looked around and found a shallow container near the dispenser, probably meant for non-humanoid species. He filled it with water and turned to face 16. The Ravager watched him with those 6 unblinking eyes. Daniel walked forward slowly, holding the container in both hands. He got within 10 feet and stopped. "I do not know if you are thirsty," Daniel said, "but if you are, here." He set the container down on the floor and backed away several steps. 16 did not move immediately. The creature's eyes shifted from Daniel to the container and back again. Several long seconds passed. Then, with movements that were surprisingly careful for something so large, 16 approached the water. Its head lowered, nostrils flaring as it sniffed the liquid. One long tongue, dark purple and rough-looking, emerged and lapped at the water. The creature drank the entire container in seconds. When it finished, 16 looked at Daniel with what might have been confusion or curiosity. The Ravager had probably never encountered prey that offered it food or water. "You are welcome," Daniel said. He returned to the center of the arena and sat down again, deliberately showing he was not using the moment of distraction to try anything. The hours continued to pass. Daniel's legs grew stiff from sitting, so he shifted to lying on his side, then his back, stretching his muscles. Every time he moved, 16's eyes tracked him, but the creature did not approach. It seemed content to observe. As Daniel stared at the ceiling, he began to notice details he had missed before. The arena walls were not smooth. There were scratches, deep gouges in the metal, claw marks. How many people had tried to climb their way out, only to fail and fall back down into the arena? How many had 16 killed in this very spot? He turned his head to look at the Ravager. In the better light now, he could see that the creature's scales were not uniform. Some were lighter, others darker. And underneath there were scars. Lots of scars. Thin lines where scales had been damaged and regrown. A thicker mark across its shoulder that looked like a burn. This creature had suffered. It had been hurt, probably many times. Daniel thought about what the guard had said. 16 had killed 16 people. But what had been done to 16 to turn it into a killer? Had it been born in a cage? Raised in darkness? Forced to fight to survive? "What did they do to you?" Daniel asked quietly. 16's ears, which Daniel had not noticed before because they were flat against its skull, twitched slightly at the sound of his voice. "I am sorry," Daniel continued. "I am sorry for whatever they did to you. You did not choose this life either, did you?" The Ravager stood suddenly and Daniel's heart jumped into his throat. But the creature did not approach him. Instead, it walked to the edge of the arena and began pacing along the wall, its tail lashing back and forth in what looked like agitation. Then the collar around Daniel's neck activated. Pain exploded through his body, every muscle seizing at once. He could not scream because his jaw was clenched too tight. Electric current raced through his nerves, setting them on fire. It lasted only 3 seconds, but it felt like forever. When it stopped, Daniel collapsed on the floor, gasping. Across the arena, 16 was also on the ground, its body twitching. The creature had a collar too, and they had activated both at the same time. A voice crackled over the speaker. "Let us see some action down there, or we will do that again. You have 5 minutes." Daniel's muscles still spasmed from the aftershocks. He pushed himself up on shaking arms and looked at 16. The Ravager was already recovering, its body built to withstand punishment. Those 6 red eyes locked onto Daniel, but now there was something different in them. Understanding. They both wore collars. They both felt pain from above. Someone up there controlled both of them. 16's head turned upward, looking at the observation windows high above. The creature's lips pulled back in what could only be described as a snarl. Then it looked back at Daniel, and something passed between them in that moment. A recognition. They had a common enemy. "I know," Daniel said, climbing slowly to his feet. "I know, they hurt you too. The 5-minute deadline passed." The voice did not return, but Daniel suspected they were watching, waiting to see what would happen. He also suspected they would get bored eventually and try to force action again. Daniel walked to the wall and found what he was looking for. Near the floor, there was a ventilation grate. The metal was old, and one corner had worked loose. He sat down and began working at it with his fingers, trying to pry it further open. It was something to do, some action that might satisfy whoever was watching. A shadow fell over him. Daniel looked up to find 16 standing directly behind him, looking down at what he was doing. The Ravager's head tilted in that curious way again. "Just trying to stay busy," Daniel explained. "Give them something to watch so they do not shock us again." 16 lowered itself to the ground beside Daniel, close enough that their bodies were almost touching. Daniel froze, not sure what to do. Then the Ravager extended one massive claw and slid it into the gap in the grate. With one smooth motion, 16 pried the entire cover free. Behind the grate was a shallow shaft, maybe 2 feet deep. Nothing useful, just dust and darkness. But that did not matter. What mattered was that 16 had helped. The creature had understood that Daniel was trying to do something and had assisted. "Thank you," Daniel said. A low rumbling sound came from 16's chest, not a growl, something else. Daniel had no reference for what it might mean, but it did not sound aggressive. They sat together by the wall for a while. Daniel's exhaustion was catching up with him. He had been awake for what felt like days, running on fear and adrenaline. Now that the immediate terror had faded into a strange companionship, his body was demanding rest. "I am very tired," Daniel said. "I need to sleep, but I'm afraid that if I sleep, you will kill me." 16 made that rumbling sound again. The creature stood and walked across the arena to a section of floor that was directly under a heating vent. Daniel had noticed earlier that area was warmer. 16 lay down there and curled its body into a position that looked almost comfortable. The Ravager turned its head to look at Daniel, then looked at the space beside it. Daniel stared. Was the creature inviting him over? Offering to share the warm spot? It seemed impossible, but then again, everything about the last few hours had been impossible. He walked over slowly. 16 watched him approach but did not tense or show any signs of aggression. Daniel sat down near the Ravager, not quite touching but close enough to feel the warmth from both the vent and the creature's body. "If you are going to kill me, please do it while I am asleep," Daniel said. "I am too tired to be afraid anymore." He lay down on the metal floor and closed his eyes. His last thought before exhaustion claimed him was that he could feel 16's breathing slow and steady beside him. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Daniel felt something other than terror. He felt safe. Daniel woke to find something wet and rough pressed against his face. His eyes snapped open and he found himself staring directly into one of 16's massive nostrils. The Ravager pulled back slightly, making a huffing sound that might have been surprise at Daniel's sudden movement. Daylight, or what passed for it in the arena, had brightened the overhead lights slightly. Daniel guessed several hours had passed. The fact that he had woken up at all, still alive and intact, felt like a miracle. Then he noticed what was lying on the floor beside him. A small creature, furry and dead, with a long tail and pointed snout. It looked similar to the rats Daniel had seen on various space stations, though this one was larger and had 6 legs instead of 4. Daniel looked at 16. The Ravager sat a few feet away watching him with those unnerving red eyes. The meaning was clear. 16 had hunted while Daniel slept and brought him food. Daniel's stomach turned at the thought of eating raw alien rodent, but he understood the significance of the gesture. In the wild back on Earth, when a predator shared its kill, it meant acceptance. It meant pack. He picked up the dead creature carefully and examined it. The killing wound was clean, a single bite to the neck. 16 had been efficient. Daniel looked around the arena and spotted a grate where the creature must have entered. The Ravager had been alert, hunting, while Daniel was vulnerable in sleep. And instead of killing him, 16 had protected him and provided food. "Thank you," Daniel said. He meant it more than he had ever meant those words before. He tore the creature roughly in half, trying not to think too hard about what he was doing. His hands shook slightly as he held out one portion toward 16. "We share," he said. "You hunted it, so you eat too." The Ravager's head tilted, that now familiar gesture of confusion. Clearly, 16 had never had prey offer to share food with it. After a moment, the creature leaned forward and carefully took the offered portion in its jaws, pulling it from Daniel's hand with surprising gentleness. Daniel forced himself to take a bite of his half. It was tough, gamey, and tasted like metal and fear, but it was protein and his body needed fuel. He chewed mechanically, watching as 16 consumed its portion in 2 quick bites. As they ate together in the strange quiet of the arena, Daniel studied the Ravager more carefully. The creature was intelligent, far more than anyone had given it credit for. It made decisions, solved problems, and showed what could only be described as consideration. The question was, could it understand communication beyond basic gestures? I am going to try something, Daniel said aloud. He pointed to himself. Daniel. He repeated it several times, tapping his chest. Daniel. That is my name. Daniel. 16 watched him, head cocked. Daniel pointed at the Ravager. You are called 16, but that is not a real name. That is a number they gave you. He tried different sounds, watching for any reaction. Most produced nothing, but when he made a low rumbling sound in the back of his throat, similar to the noise 16 had made earlier, the creature's ears perked up. Daniel adjusted the sound, making it deeper, more resonant. 16 responded with its own rumble, and the tones were remarkably similar. They had found something, the beginning of communication. For the next hour, Daniel worked on building a basic vocabulary. A rumble for agreement or contentment. A higher-pitched chirp for alert or attention. A hissing sound that seemed to mean danger or dislike. 16 participated actively, sometimes initiating sounds and waiting for Daniel to repeat them. They were learning each other's language. The observation windows above had gone dark. Daniel assumed the crime lords had gotten bored watching two subjects sit peacefully and teach each other sounds. That was fine with him. The less attention they drew, the better. Then the wall panels opened and everything changed. Two machines rolled into the arena, each about 4 feet tall and bristling with weapons. Combat drones, the kind used for security on high-risk stations. Their sensors swept the room, locking onto first Daniel, then 16. Red targeting lasers painted both of them. Looks like our audience got bored, Daniel said, backing away slowly. They want a show. The first drone fired without warning. An energy bolt scorched the air where Daniel had been standing a second before. He dove to the side, rolling behind one of the support pillars that dotted the arena. The metal was thick enough to provide cover, barely. 16 moved like liquid shadow. The Ravager crossed 20 feet in a single leap. Claws extended and crashed into the first drone. Metal shrieked as those claws tore through armor plating. The drone's weapon swiveled, trying to target 16 at point-blank range, but the Ravager was too fast. Powerful jaws closed around the drone's sensor cluster and crushed it with a sickening crunch. The second drone had a clearer shot at Daniel. It fired a net, electrified and weighted, designed to capture and subdue. Daniel tried to dodge, but his human reflexes were too slow. The net expanded in midair, about to envelop him. 16's tail whipped across the arena. The bone spikes caught the net and slammed it into the wall inches from Daniel's head. The electricity discharged harmlessly against the metal wall panels, and the net fell to the floor in a smoking heap. The second drone recalculated, recognizing 16 as the primary threat. It fired a sustained energy beam at the Ravager. 16 roared, a sound that shook the arena and made Daniel's bones vibrate. The creature charged straight at the drone, ignoring the beam that scorched its scales. 16 hit the machine like a battering ram, and they both crashed to the floor in a tangle of claws and metal. Daniel could only watch as 16 systematically tore the second drone apart. The Ravager was terrifying in combat, all controlled fury and devastating strength. But what struck Daniel most was that 16 had chosen to save him. The creature could have let the net take Daniel, could have used the distraction to escape or attack. Instead, it had protected him. When both drones lay in smoking ruins, 16 turned to Daniel. The creature's scales were blackened in places from the energy weapons, and Daniel could smell burned flesh. 16 had been hurt defending him. "Are you okay?" Daniel asked, approaching slowly. He reached out hesitantly, and when 16 did not pull away, he gently touched one of the burned areas. The Ravager flinched slightly but allowed the contact. "I wish I had something to treat this," Daniel said. "Back on Earth, we would put cold water on burns. Maybe that would help?" He went to the water dispenser and soaked the thin fabric of his shirt sleeve. Returning to 16, he carefully dabbed at the burned scales. The creature rumbled softly, that sound of contentment or approval, and Daniel took it as permission to continue. As he worked, Daniel noticed something. 16's tail had wrapped loosely around Daniel's leg, not constricting or threatening, just resting there. The gesture was protective, possessive even. Daniel had seen similar behavior in dogs back on Earth, when they leaned against their owners or positioned themselves close. It was pack behavior, bonding behavior. "You saved my life," Daniel said quietly. "You did not have to do that. You could have let them take me, but you did not." 16's massive head lowered until it was level with Daniel's. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Then, with a gentleness that seemed impossible for a creature with so many claws and teeth, 16 pressed its forehead against Daniel's. The touch lasted only a second before 16 pulled back, but it meant everything. It was a gesture of recognition, of respect, maybe even of affection. Daniel had seen similar behaviors in various animal species during his travels. This was how social creatures acknowledged each other as members of the same group. "Yeah," Daniel said, his voice rough with emotion he did not expect. "I feel the same way. We are in this together now, are we not?" 16 made that rumbling sound again, and this time Daniel was certain it meant agreement. They spent the rest of the day working together. Daniel salvaged parts from the destroyed drones, collecting anything that might be useful. 16 seemed to understand what he was doing, and helped by crushing open the thicker armor panels that Daniel could not pry apart with his hands. Among the salvage, Daniel found components that looked familiar from his work as a cargo hauler: power cells, circuit boards, and wiring. An idea began forming in his mind. The collars around their necks were technological devices. If he could understand how they worked, maybe he could disable them. It was a long shot, probably impossible. But Daniel had already achieved the impossible by befriending a creature that was supposed to kill him. What was one more miracle? As the arena lights began to dim, marking the approach of the second night, Daniel gathered his salvaged components and sat near 16. The Ravager curled its large body around Daniel, creating a barrier between him and the rest of the arena. "Tomorrow we figure out how to get these collars off," Daniel said, "and then we find a way out of here. Both of us. Together." 16's tail wrapped around Daniel more firmly, and the creature's rumbling purr filled the space between them. In the observation room above, someone was probably angry that their entertainment had turned into something else entirely. But down in the arena, a human and a so-called monster had become friends. And that friendship was about to become very dangerous for anyone who tried to keep them caged. Sleep came easier the second night. Daniel woke several times to find 16 alert and watchful, those 6 eyes glowing softly in the darkness. Each time, the Ravager would make a soft rumbling sound, almost reassuring, and Daniel would drift back to sleep. It was strange how quickly fear could transform into trust when survival depended on cooperation. When the lights brightened to mark the third day, Daniel immediately got to work. He had spent half the night thinking about the collars, about how they functioned and what might disable them. The technology was not that complicated, just a power source, a receiver for remote signals, and the shock mechanism itself. If he could disrupt any one of those components, the collar would become nothing more than a metal ring. He spread out the salvaged drone parts on the floor in front of him. 16 sat nearby, watching with clear interest as Daniel sorted through circuits and wires. The Ravager had learned that when Daniel was working with the small objects, it was helpful to stay close but not interfere. The creature's massive claws were not built for delicate work. "I need to create an electromagnetic pulse," Daniel explained, talking through his plan even though he was not sure how much 16 understood. "Something strong enough to fry the collar circuits, but focused enough that it does not knock out the whole arena. Otherwise, the doors will not open even if we do disable these things." He held up a power cell from one of the drones. "This has enough charge, I think. And these circuit boards can be modified to release all that energy at once instead of gradually. The trick is directing it." Daniel worked for hours connecting components in ways they were never meant to be connected. His hands shook slightly from hunger and exhaustion, but he forced himself to focus. This was their chance. Maybe their only chance. 16 brought him water twice, carrying a container carefully in its jaws. The creature had learned to use the dispenser itself, pressing the panel with one claw. Daniel drank gratefully and returned to his work. Finally, he had something that looked like it might work. A crude device made from drone parts held together with wire and hope. It had one button, salvaged from a control panel that would trigger the discharge. There was no way to test it except to use it. And if it failed, the feedback might trigger the collars instead of disabling them. Daniel sat back and looked at 16. "This is risky. If I am wrong, this could hurt us badly, maybe kill us. But if I do nothing, we stay trapped. They will never let us go. You know that, right?" 16's tail swept across the floor. A gesture Daniel had learned meant agitation or concern. The Ravager understood danger, even if it did not understand all the words. "Do you trust me?" Daniel asked. The creature moved closer and pressed its forehead against Daniel's again, that gesture of bonding they had shared before. Daniel took that as a yes, okay, he said, his voice steadier than he felt. Here we go. He pressed the button. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Daniel's heart sank. Then the device in his hands began to vibrate. Heat built rapidly in the circuits. 16's eyes widened, all 6 of them fixed on the glowing device. Daniel dropped it on the floor between them and backed away quickly, pulling 16 with him. The pulse was not visible, but Daniel felt it. A wave of energy that made his teeth ache and his vision blur for a second. The lights in the arena flickered. The cameras on the wall sparked and went dark. And the collar around Daniel's neck made a high-pitched whine before falling silent. He grabbed at it with shaking hands. The metal was hot, but the locking mechanism had released. The collar came off and clattered to the floor. Daniel looked at 16. The Ravager's collar had also released and lay on the ground, the small control box smoking slightly. We did it, Daniel whispered. We actually did it. Alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red lights flashed along the arena walls. A voice came over the speaker system, distorted and angry. Containment breach. Lockdown initiated. All security to the arena level. Daniel's moment of triumph evaporated. They had disabled the collars, but now every guard in the facility would be coming for them. And they were still locked in the arena with nowhere to go. 16 stood and moved to the door where the Ravager had first entered. The creature examined it carefully, then looked back at Daniel. Those red eyes were focused, intelligent, calculating. 16 pressed one claw against the door panel, testing it. The door did not budge. It was magnetically sealed, designed to withstand forces far greater than even a Ravager could produce. The door will not open from inside, Daniel said. It is controlled from the observation deck. He pointed upward at the windows high above. 16 followed his gesture and stared at the windows for a long moment. Then the creature did something that surprised Daniel. It lowered itself into a crouch and looked back at him, making a chirping sound they had established meant attention or readiness. It took Daniel a moment to understand. You want me to get on your back? 16 chirped again and remained in position. The Ravager was offering to carry him. Daniel approached carefully and climbed onto 16's back, gripping the ridges of scales along the creature's spine. The Ravager's body was warm and solid beneath him. 16 stood and Daniel was suddenly 8 feet off the ground, holding on for his life. What are you planning? Daniel asked. He got his answer immediately. 16 exploded into motion, running full speed at the arena wall. Daniel barely had time to register what was happening before the Ravager leaped, claws extended, and caught the wall. The claws sank into the metal with a screech, finding purchase. Then 16 began to climb. Daniel pressed himself flat against the creature's back, arms wrapped around its neck as they ascended the sheer wall. 16 climbed with terrifying speed, each movement precise and powerful. The observation deck was 50 feet up, and they covered the distance in seconds. When they reached the reinforced window, 16 balanced on a small ledge and began hammering at the transparent metal with bone spikes and claws. Cracks appeared. Daniel could see figures inside the observation deck scrambling, some running for exits, others reaching for weapons. The circuits, Daniel shouted, pointing to the window frame. The window has power running through it. If you damage the frame, it might short out. 16 adjusted its attack, focusing on the corner where the window met the wall. Sparks flew. Alarms grew louder. Daniel clung to the Ravager's back, uselessly trying to help by kicking at the already damaged areas. Gas began pouring into the arena below, a thick green cloud that rose quickly. It was toxic. Daniel could tell by the way his eyes started watering even from 50 feet up. They had minutes at most before the gas would reach them. 16 roared in fury and slammed its entire body weight against the window. The frame finally gave way. The reinforced panel cracked, then shattered outward. 16 crashed through into the observation deck with Daniel still clinging to its back. They tumbled across the floor in a shower of glass and metal fragments. Daniel rolled clear as 16 found its feet and spun to face the dozen criminals who had been watching the arena. These were the ones who had bet on Daniel's death, who had enjoyed the show. Now the show was in their room. Most of them ran. A few were too shocked to move. One pulled a weapon, but 16 was faster. The Ravager crossed the room and knocked the weapon away with its tail, sending the criminal sprawling. But the creature did not pursue. Instead, 16 returned to Daniel and positioned itself between him and everyone else in the room. Daniel stood on shaking legs, his lungs burning from the gas he had inhaled. "We are leaving," he announced to anyone still listening. "Both of us. And if anyone tries to stop us, you will have to deal with him." He gestured to 16, who bared all of its very sharp teeth in emphasis. A door at the far end of the observation deck slid open. A woman entered, flanked by 2 guards who looked distinctly uncomfortable. She wore a station security uniform, but the insignia marked her as high-ranking. Her eyes moved between Daniel, 16, and the destruction around them. "I am Officer Halloran," she said calmly, as if walking into a room with an escaped Ravager was something she did every day. "I think we need to talk about what happens next." Daniel's response was immediate. "What happens next is we walk out of here, or we go through anyone who tries to stop us." 16 rumbled in agreement, a sound that made the guards take a step back. Halloran raised her hand slowly. "No one is trying to stop you, but we need to discuss terms. You have information about illegal activities on this station. I have the authority to negotiate. The only term I have is freedom," Daniel said. "For both of us." "That can be arranged," Halloran replied. She gestured toward a screen on the wall. "But first you need to see something. You are not the only ones who have suffered here." The screen activated, showing holding cells. Inside each cell, Daniel could see other beings. Some looked like they were fighters, scarred and dangerous. Others looked like him, just people who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. All of them wore the same collars Daniel and 16 had just removed. "This facility has been running death matches for 5 years, Halloran said. "I have been trying to build a case against the owners, but they have powerful friends. Today you gave me the evidence I needed. You and your friend here have been recorded breaking out of an escape-proof arena, demonstrating that these collars can be removed, and showing exactly how this operation works." Daniel looked at the prisoners on the screen, then at 16. The Ravager's 6 eyes were fixed on the images, and Daniel wondered what the creature was thinking. "Free them," Daniel said. "Free all of them. Then we will talk." Halloran smiled slightly. "I was hoping you would say that." Officer Halloran led them through corridors that smelled like recycled air and fear. Her guards kept their distance, weapons lowered but ready, their eyes never leaving 16. The Ravager walked beside Daniel, close enough that their bodies occasionally brushed. The creature's tail stayed raised in a defensive position, ready to strike at any threat. They passed through 3 security checkpoints, each one sealing behind them with heavy magnetic locks. Daniel counted the exits, noted the camera positions, and marked the locations of emergency panels. Old habits from his cargo hauler days. Always know your escape routes. Finally, they reached a conference room with a wide table and multiple screens mounted on the walls. Halloran gestured for Daniel to sit. 16 remained standing, positioning itself behind Daniel's chair like a guardian. "Water?" Halloran offered, sliding a container across the table. Daniel took it gratefully and drank half before offering the rest to 16. The Ravager leaned down and lapped it up, never taking its eyes off Halloran. "I have been investigating this facility for 8 months, Halloran began, pulling up files on the screens. "The death matches, the betting rings, all of it. But every time I got close to evidence, it disappeared. Witnesses refused to talk. Records were altered. The people running this operation have connections that reach into the highest levels of station administration." "Why are you telling me this?" Daniel asked. "Because you escaped. No one escapes the pit. The fact that you are sitting here alive with that creature protecting you instead of killing you changes everything. It proves the fights are not fair, that prisoners are being tortured and exploited. And more importantly, it proves these Ravagers are intelligent." She pulled up footage on the screen, and Daniel saw himself sitting in the arena on that first night, talking to 16. He watched as they shared food, as 16 saved him from the drones as they worked together. "This footage went out on the betting networks," Halloran continued. "Thousands of people across multiple systems saw a human befriend a supposed killing machine. Some are calling it fake. Others are calling it proof that Ravagers should have sentient rights. Either way, you have started something that cannot be stopped." Daniel looked at 16. The creature watched the screens with intense focus, seeing itself for the first time from an outside perspective. "What do you want from us?" "Testimony. Official statements about what happened to you. In exchange, I will free every prisoner in this facility, shut down the fighting rings, and make sure you and 16 are granted travel clearance with no restrictions. And the people who run this place will face charges." I have enough evidence now to bring them down, but your testimony will seal it. Daniel considered this. It sounded too easy. What is the catch? Halloran hesitated, and Daniel knew his instinct was right. There was always a catch. The Galactic Council does not recognize Ravagers as sentient, she said slowly. Officially, they are classified as dangerous animals. If I release 16, the classification board will want to study it, possibly confine it to a research facility. You would be separated. 16 made a low growling sound. The creature understood separation even if it did not understand all the words. No, Daniel said flatly. We stay together or there is no deal. I expected you would say that. I have a proposal. There is a loophole in the classification system. If a creature demonstrates consistent non-aggressive behavior and bonded partnership with a recognized citizen, it can be granted provisional sentient status pending full review. The review process takes years, but during that time, you could stay together as legal partners. What does that require? You would need to formally register as 16's guardian and sponsor. The creature would be legally your responsibility. Any damage it causes, any laws it breaks, those fall on you. It is a risk. Daniel did not hesitate. I will do it. Halloran pulled out a datapad and began entering information. I need some details. First, you cannot keep calling it 16. It needs a name for the legal documents. Daniel turned to look at 16. The Ravager's 6 eyes met his, and he remembered all the sounds they had developed together. The rumbles, the chirps, the complex vocalizations that were the beginning of a shared language. How about Rook? Daniel said. Short, simple, sounds like the rumble sound you make. 16, now Rook tilted its head. Then the creature rumbled deeply, and Daniel could have sworn he saw approval in those alien eyes. Rook it is, Halloran said, typing. Second, where do you plan to go after this? You will need an address on file. I have a cargo ship, Daniel said. I was a hauler before all this. The ship is probably still an impound from when I was arrested. We will need that back. I can arrange that. Your arrest will be marked as wrongful detention, and your ship will be released with compensation for the impound fees. But Daniel, you should know that this story has spread beyond this station. People will recognize you. Some will see you as a hero. Others will see you as a threat. Traveling with a Ravager will not be easy. Daniel thought about that. His old life of simple cargo runs was gone. He could not go back to being invisible, just another hauler in the shipping lanes. He had become something else, and so had Rook. We will figure it out, he said. Over the next several hours, Halloran kept her word. Daniel watched on the screens as prisoners were released from their cells, collars removed, medical treatment provided. Some were confused, others wept with relief. A few were angry, wanting revenge against their captors. Station security separated them carefully, processing each one. The crime lords who had run the fighting rings were arrested on the observation deck, along with dozens of conspirators throughout the station. The evidence was overwhelming, especially with the testimony Daniel provided. By the time the processing was complete, the entire operation had been dismantled. As the station's clock marked midnight, Halloran returned to the conference room where Daniel and Rook had been waiting. She looked exhausted but satisfied. It is done. The prisoners are free, the criminals are in custody, and your ship is being prepped for departure. You can leave whenever you are ready. Daniel stood and Rook rose with him. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. The hard part comes next. The classification board will schedule your hearing within 6 months. You will need to prove that Rook is sentient and that your partnership is stable. If you fail, they will take Rook away from you. We will not fail, Daniel said with certainty. He looked at Rook, and the creature's tail wrapped gently around his leg, that gesture of connection they had developed. We have already survived the impossible together. What is one more challenge? Halloran handed him a data chip. This contains all your documentation, your ship's clearance codes, and a list of contacts who can help you if you run into trouble. Some of them are people I trust. Others are just sympathetic to your situation. Use them carefully. She paused at the door. One more thing. There is a distress call that came in this morning from a civilian transport in the outer reaches. Pirates attacked them and they are stranded. Station security is stretched too thin to respond, and the nearest military patrol is 3 days away. I am not officially asking you to help, but if you are heading in that direction anyway. Daniel understood. This was a test. A way to prove that he and Rook were not a danger but a potential asset. It was also the right thing to do. Send us the coordinates, he said. Halloran smiled. I thought you might say that. Good luck, Daniel Wright. And Rook, I hope the galaxy is ready for you. They left the station 2 hours later. Daniel's ship, a small cargo transport called the Wanderer, was exactly as he had left it except for a fresh fuel charge and some updated navigation systems that Halloran had included as part of the compensation. It was not a large ship, just a cockpit, a small cargo bay, and basic living quarters. But it was home. Rook explored every corner of the ship with intense curiosity, sniffing at control panels and tapping claws against the walls to test their strength. The creature was too large for the sleeping quarters, but the cargo bay had enough space for Rook to curl up comfortably. Daniel sat in the pilot's seat and entered the coordinates Halloran had provided. The civilian transport was 6 hours away at full speed. He looked back at the cargo bay where Rook had settled, those 6 eyes watching him with trust. "Ready for your first rescue mission?" Daniel asked. Rook rumbled in response, and Daniel took that as a yes. The Wanderer's engines powered up and they left the station behind. Through the viewport, Daniel could see the prison moon of Blackwater receding into the distance. 3 days ago, he had thought his life was over. He had been thrown into an arena to die, locked in with a monster. Instead, he had found a friend. As they accelerated toward the distress call, Daniel thought about what Halloran had said. The galaxy might not be ready for them, but ready or not, Daniel and Rook were about to show the universe what a human and a Ravager could accomplish together. The hard part was behind them. The real adventure was just beginning. Dawn had broken not just on a new day, but on a new partnership. The beast had become his protector, and the human had become the beast's voice. Together they would write a new story, one that no one could have predicted, and it would start with saving lives instead of taking them. The distress beacon grew stronger as the Wanderer approached the coordinates. Daniel could see the civilian transport on his scanner now, a medium-sized passenger vessel called the New Horizon. It was drifting without power, and according to the readouts, its hull had been breached in multiple locations. Life support was failing. "Looks like the pirates did a number on them," Daniel said, mostly to himself. Rook had moved up behind the pilot's seat and was watching the viewport with intense focus. The creature seemed to understand they were heading toward people in danger. Daniel opened a communication channel. "New Horizon, this is the Wanderer. I am responding to your distress call. What is your situation?" Static crackled for a moment before a voice came through, shaky with stress. "Wanderer, thank God. This is Captain Perry of the New Horizon. We were attacked 8 hours ago. Pirates boarded us, took our cargo, and damaged our engines when they left. We have 43 passengers, including 12 children. Our air is running out, and we cannot repair the engines without parts we do not have. I am coming alongside now. I have docking capabilities. Can you get everyone to your port airlock?" "Yes, but Wanderer, you need to know something. The pirates left behind surveillance drones. If we try to evacuate and another ship approaches, they will come back. They do this sometimes, leave people stranded, and then rob the rescue ships too." Daniel checked his scanner. Sure enough, there were 3 small objects floating in the debris field around the New Horizon. They were in standby mode now, but they would activate as soon as his ship got within docking range. "I see them," Daniel said. "Do not worry. I have a plan." He closed the communication and looked back at Rook. "Those drones will try to disable my ship when we get close. I need you to deal with them." Rook's tail lashed once, a gesture Daniel had learned meant readiness for action. The creature understood. Daniel maneuvered the Wanderer closer to the New Horizon, watching the drones on his scanner. At 50 meters, they activated. Their sensors locked onto his ship and they began moving to intercept. Daniel did not try to avoid them. Instead, he opened the cargo bay doors. "Go," he said. Rook launched out of the cargo bay in a controlled leap, claws extended. There was no air in space, but the creature did not need to breathe for short periods. Ravagers had evolved on a death world where toxic atmospheric conditions were common. They could survive vacuum for up to 10 minutes. The first drone never saw Rook coming. The Ravager crashed into it with devastating force, claws tearing through its hull. Rook used the momentum to push off toward the second drone, moving through space with a grace that seemed impossible. The second drone tried to evade, but Rook's tail whipped out and caught it, pulling the machine close enough for those powerful jaws to crush its core. The third drone fired a weapon, an energy beam that scored across Rook's shoulder. The creature did not slow. Rook closed the distance and destroyed the drone in seconds, then used the wreckage as a launching point to return to the Wanderer. Daniel had the cargo bay open and waiting. Rook sailed through the opening and Daniel sealed the bay immediately, repressurizing it. The entire encounter had taken less than 2 minutes. "Are you okay?" Daniel called through the internal communication system. Rook's rumble came back through the speaker, and Daniel could hear the satisfaction in it. The creature was fine, probably enjoying the chance to use its natural abilities. With the drones destroyed, Daniel completed his approach to the new horizon. The docking process was smooth, and within minutes the airlocks were connected and sealed. Daniel opened the door to find Captain Perry on the other side, a woman with gray hair and a face lined with worry. "How did you take out those drones?" she asked immediately. "I saw something moving out there, but it was too fast to track." "I have a very good co-pilot," Daniel said. "Start getting your passengers aboard. My cargo bay is not luxurious, but it will hold everyone until we reach a station." The evacuation began immediately. Families moved through the airlock, carrying whatever possessions they could grab. Children cried, parents looked exhausted, and everyone had the haunted look of people who had come too close to death. Daniel helped them settle in the cargo bay, distributing water and what little food he had. One small girl, maybe 5 years old, noticed Rook before anyone else did. The creature had moved to the back of the cargo bay, trying to stay out of the way. But when the girl saw those 6 red eyes watching from the shadows, she did not scream. Instead, she walked straight toward Rook. Her mother lunged to grab her, but Daniel caught the woman's arm. "Wait," he said. The girl approached Rook slowly, the way children approach large animals when curiosity overrides fear. She stopped a few feet away and tilted her head, studying the creature. Rook tilted its head the same way, mirroring her. "Are you a dragon?" the girl asked. Rook rumbled softly, that sound of contentment. Then, moving with incredible care, the creature lowered itself to the floor and extended one massive claw. The girl reached out and touched it, her small hand barely covering one of Rook's claws. "You are nice," she said with absolute certainty. Then she turned back to her mother. "Mom, look! A nice dragon." Other children noticed and approached, their fear melting away with the confidence only children could have. Soon Rook was surrounded by small humans, all wanting to touch the scales and ask questions. The creature remained perfectly still, patient and gentle, allowing them to explore. The adults watched in amazement. Captain Perry stood beside Daniel, shaking her head. "That is a Ravager. I have seen the warnings, read the reports. They are supposed to be unstoppable killers." "Rook was trained to be a killer," Daniel said quietly, "forced to fight in death matches for entertainment. But that is not what Rook is. That is what was done to Rook. There is a difference." "Rook? You gave it a name?" "Rook gave Rook a name, actually. We just found a way to say it in a language I could pronounce." Perry looked at him with new understanding. "The story about the human who escaped the pit, that was you?" "Yes." "And that is the creature you were locked in with?" "Yes, Rook was supposed to kill me. Instead, Rook saved me. Multiple times." Perry was quiet for a moment, watching as Rook allowed a child to climb onto its back. "We live in a strange galaxy," she said finally, "full of people who see monsters where there are only misunderstood creatures. Thank you for coming to help us, and thank you for bringing your friend." The evacuation took another hour. Once everyone was aboard, Daniel disconnected from the new horizon and set course for the nearest station with proper facilities. It would be a 12-hour journey, cramped and uncomfortable, but everyone would survive. The children fell asleep curled up against Rook's warm body. The creature had become their guardian, making sure they felt safe. Parents who had been terrified at first began to relax, seeing how gentle Rook was with the young ones. Daniel sat in the cockpit, monitoring their course and thinking about everything that had changed. A week ago, he had been a simple cargo hauler, invisible and unremarkable. Now he was partnered with a Ravager, rescuing stranded civilians and about to face a galaxy that was not sure what to make of them. Captain Perry came forward and leaned against the doorway. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. What are you going to do after this? You cannot just go back to hauling cargo with a Ravager on your ship. The galaxy will not let you be anonymous anymore." Daniel had been thinking about that question since they left the station. "We are going to help people. There are a lot of places in the outer reaches where law and order are suggestions, not realities. Places where people like us, the ones who do not have power or influence, get exploited. Rook and I are going to change that. That is a dangerous path. So is getting locked in an arena with a killer. We survived that. We can survive anything," Perry smiled. Well, when you start your operation, let me know. The New Horizon needs a new purpose after this anyway. Maybe we can help. The thought surprised Daniel. He had not considered building something larger, but Perry was right. There were probably others out there who wanted to help, who saw the injustice in the galaxy and wanted to fight it. Maybe Daniel and Rook could be the start of something bigger. I will think about it, he said. The rest of the journey passed quietly. Daniel dozed in the pilot's seat, trusting the autopilot to keep them on course. He woke to Rook's rumble and found the station approaching on the view screen. It was a civilian hub, large and well-maintained, nothing like the corrupt facility they had escaped from. Daniel guided the Wanderer into a docking bay and opened the cargo bay doors. Station security was waiting along with medical personnel. Captain Perry organized the evacuation efficiently, making sure everyone got the care they needed. As passengers filed out, many stopped to thank Daniel and to say goodbye to Rook. The children hugged the creature's legs and Rook rumbled softly to each one. When everyone was off the ship, Perry returned one last time. She handed Daniel a data chip. My contact information along with contacts for other captains I trust. When you are ready to do more than just rescue missions, call me. We will help however we can. Thank you, Daniel said. She left and Daniel closed the cargo bay. The ship felt empty now without the passengers. He moved to the bay and found Rook sitting in the center, those 6 eyes watching him approach. Just you and me again, Daniel said, sitting down beside the creature. Rook's tail wrapped around him gently, and the Ravager's head rested on Daniel's shoulder. It was a gesture of affection, of trust, of partnership. They had been through so much together in such a short time. From enemies to allies to something deeper. Family. Daniel pulled out a small notebook he had started keeping. On the first page he wrote, New Horizon passengers rescued. 43 people, 12 children, all safe. He would keep track of everyone they helped, a reminder of why they were doing this. His datapad chimed with a new message. It was from Officer Halloran. Good work on the New Horizon rescue. Word is spreading fast. You already have people asking how to hire you for protection jobs. I told you the galaxy was not ready for you. Prove me wrong. Daniel smiled. He wrote back, We will do our best. He looked at Rook. What do you say? Ready to become heroes? Rook rumbled in that deep, resonant way that meant agreement and excitement. The creature stood and moved to the viewport, looking out at the stars beyond. Daniel joined Rook there, and together they stood in silence, contemplating what came next. They had started as prisoner and executioner. They had become friends and partners. Now they would become something the galaxy had never seen before, a human and a Ravager working together not to destroy but to protect. Not to take lives, but to save them. The crime lords had locked Daniel in with a killer, expecting him to die before dawn. Instead, by dawn, the beast had become his protector. And that protection extended beyond just Daniel now. It extended to anyone who needed help, anyone who was trapped or exploited or forgotten. They would be the ones who answered when no one else would. They would be the voices for those who had none. They would show the galaxy that strength was not just about claws and teeth, but about compassion and courage. Daniel placed his hand on Rook's shoulder, feeling the warmth of the creature through its scales. Let us go find someone else who needs saving, he said. Rook rumbled in agreement, and the sound filled the cargo bay with promise. The Wanderer's engines powered up, and they left the station behind, heading into the vast darkness between stars. Somewhere out there, people needed help, and now those people had champions. An unlikely partnership, a human and a Ravager, bound by survival and forged by friendship. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you underestimated the power of empathy, the strength of companionship, and the determination of two beings who refused to let injustice stand. They locked a human with a killer. By dawn, the beast became his protector, and together they would become legends,